Well, I've been in Washington, D.C. this week to talk about UK-US relations and particularly the prospects of a new trade deal, also the EU-US trade agreement and TTIP, and making sure that, as a British MEP, I still want to see a TTIP agreement. And finally, some of the aspects and answering questions about an EU-UK future relationship. One of the things that's been quite clear to me is that there's a political will here in the United States and here in Washington to sign a US-UK deal as quickly as possible, understanding that the UK cannot start negotiating agreements until after we leave the EU. But also at the same time, it's quite clear that we have to keep pushing for this agenda for open trade, and there are people who are against trade who will try and block future trade agreements. To help me discuss some of these issues, I'm here with Ted Bromund from the Heritage Foundation. In fact, Ted's just hosted me at a seminar here. Ted, we talked a lot about trade, we talked a lot about the US-UK relationship. Tell me a bit about what you've picked up since the elections, the presidential election especially. What can we expect from Trump in terms of, and also on the Hill, in terms of a US-UK trade relationship?
Well, President Trump has been very clear that he doesn't like old-style trade deals. And by that he means trade deals between lots of nations, big multilateral deals. He thinks deals between two nations, the US and the UK, for example, are simpler to negotiate. They can be done between countries that are relied upon not to cheat each other. They're liable to be fairer and easier for people in the street to understand. And I think all those points make a lot of sense. Of course, there's a lot of admiration in the United States for the United Kingdom. Everyone knows it's a law-abiding, free-trading, open market internationalist kind of place, so there are no concerns in that regard. And everyone knows that the UK pays good wages to its workers, so Americans aren't worried about being undercut by British workers. So for all those reasons, and more besides, there's a lot of enthusiasm in the US for a deal with Britain.
I've been very pleased to hear from people here that they want to see a US-UK trade agreement, but then we'll get down to the detail of negotiations, and without going into details here, what do you think some of the difficult issues might be for a US-UK trade relationship?
Look, all of us have issues, both in Britain and the United States, that we're a little bit neuralgic about. People in Britain are concerned about the future of the NHS. People in America don't necessarily want individual American states to have to open up their contracting markets to foreign contractors. I personally think that would be very desirable, but it's not up for me to say. I think it would be sensible for both of us just to respect that we each have issues that we find a little bit difficult, not push each other on those difficult points. We shouldn't push you on the NHS. You shouldn't push us on contracting. Do the best deal we can, as fast as we can, grab the low-hanging fruit, disagree like civilized people, and move on to the next issue.
Now, you talked about Trump saying that he wanted new style trade agreements. One of the issues you have is that you have trade negotiators who like to use existing trade negotiations and agreements as templates for future trade negotiations. How do we get around that?
Well, you're exactly right that the U.S., and for that matter the European Union, have template trade agreements. The U.S. template is about 90% of the finished deal. And if we want a trade agreement between the U.S. and the U.K., we're going to have to throw those templates out, because they are meant for countries, for example, the U.S. and Vietnam, that are very different in terms of their legal systems, their history, their governmental structure, and many other things. Between the U.S. and the U.K., we have a common legal tradition, common language. We have so many financial and trade interests in common. This is an opportunity for us to get rid of the templates and to do a deal between two democratic, law-abiding, free market, internationalist kind of places that will set a new template for a kind of agreement that the United States could have with other countries around the world that are similar. And for that matter, an agreement between the UK, Australia, New Zealand, maybe Singapore, an agreement that I think would be fantastic for everyone involved.
Now, one of the challenges, those of us who believe in open trade and free trade and want to see more trade, is the fact that the free trade sometimes gets a bad rap. It gets a bad reputation. It's seen to destroy jobs by some. And what people focus on are the losses rather than the gains, which are often dispersed across a nation or across international boundaries. How do we sell trade in terms of, what are the benefits to voters in my constituency and voters in the United States in terms of some of the advantages of trade agreements?
There's no question that the United States could make everything that it currently imports. We have obviously huge imports, but technically we have the ability to make every single thing that we import. If we did that, we would all be vastly poorer, and many Americans would not have jobs that come from the importing of foreign goods, the selling of foreign goods, and working for foreign companies. Imports are not a sin. They are a private arrangement between a willing importer and a willing exporter, and collectively they make all of us a good deal better off. Now, there are always going to be interests out there, and we shouldn't forget them, that are going to be the losers out of a free trade agreement. We should admit that maturely. But we should also remember that we are the most prosperous right now than we have ever been in human history. And so much of that is because of the wise things we have done since World War II to promote a freer and more open international economic order. And just on a more political level, I would add that people who don't like free trade tend not to like human freedom in lots of other areas. Because we talk about free trade, we're not talking about trade between nations. We're talking about my ability to buy what I want and your ability to sell what you want. I agree there shouldn't be free trade in poison or nuclear weapons, but in almost all areas of human concern, it's our personal freedom that we're talking about.
Well, actually, if you boil down international trade into the simplest terms, it really is about a willing seller in one country selling to a willing buyer in another country. And I think one of the things that we're going to have to face up to after Britain leaves the EU is that actually what we need is for Britain to be a global trading nation, to be signing trade agreements around the world, and to be making the case, a positive case, for free and open trade. And one of the first steps towards that is clearly signing a UK-US trade agreement that can be one of these new types of agreement, but actually addresses the concerns of those who might be against open trade.